It's live now. So this is Jim Hamilton with Core Resonance. And Keita, how do you pronounce your last name?
Spock. I think I'm Mr. Spock.
So it's really not much different than Spock. But it has a Spock, has a little bit of spin on it.
Yeah, just put an SH in front there instead of just a straight Spock.
Yeah. All right, very good. And actually what we have, and Keita, you call your company is KS?
KS Communications, as per my initials.
And you're out of Ottawa or near Ottawa?
I'm in Ottawa, Canada, yeah.
Okay. And of course, what we're doing here is Resonance Matters. We've been doing it for over a year. The format's changed a little bit. We do a live call here for about 45 minutes. The last 15 minutes for people listen in are able to participate and ask questions or offer thoughts, etc. Now, she and I have been talking, and we've just gone live, and I wanted to continue with a thought. First off, part of our theme today is synchronicity manifesting, which is something Keita came up with this last week. But to our earlier conversation, which we're now recording, one of the things I've noticed is that as I let go of, we were talking about how people change or how we change, and as we evolve and become more conscious, people who have been a match for us may not any longer be. And so what it takes is the courage or the wherewithal to let clients go or to let friendships go if they're no longer a match, if they no longer feed us in the direction and the momentum we're going. And what I've noticed for myself in my personal life is lately, as I've let go, okay, I've started to acquire friendships. I'm down here in Scottsdale now for about a year. I've done a lot of networking. I'm starting to acquire friendships and partnerships and this and that. And what I'm noticing, where I might have settled in the past a little bit quicker in friendships and relationships that I might have perceived as good in the old days, I'm actually a little bit more relaxed about it. And I'm finding that as I run across any kind of resistance or negativity or just not exactly the right mix, I let it go instead of holding on to it. And what happens is what comes continues to refine itself, because most of us will grab on and make do with what we have in some manner or another. And I'm discovering, and we're talking about this exact thing, and is that making do doesn't work. And as I let go of even subtle new relationships that have a certain kind of when I say negativity or resistance or rigidity, I'm not any longer following that relationship. I'm letting it go. And sometimes they will come back, maybe in a new manner, and if they do, then they continue. But I'm finding that the subtlety of only taking what really works refines my world and my manifesting in a very big way. And that is what we were talking about a little bit, right?
That's right.
So what does that have to do with synchronicity and manifesting?
Well, it's interesting because it's the front part of this conversation are people either growing or deliberately choosing to be apart, whether it's professionally or otherwise. And synchronicity, in fact, invites commonality, invites a coming together. So there's almost an opposites conversation happening, because the synchronicity manifesting phrase that I came up with is the fact that common circumstances or elements or happenings are what we would call synchronicities. And usually they're of a pleasant nature. When someone talks about a synchronicity or a coincidence or a happenstance, all these types of encounters and happenings tend to have a positive spin on them. They tend to be received well, and they seem to be a pleasant surprise to someone who is experiencing them. when one is in a more subtle state, these kind of happenings or synchronicities are become more prevalent. And that may be because there's a greater awareness and a greater gratitude as a result. But that kind of capacity to be thankful invites a greater sense of synchronicity, because it's almost as if the universe says, gee, he's a pretty good guy. He seems to be grateful for all that's happening. So we're going to provide more of this. It's that kind of liking attracting the like. So that's the synchronicity. The manifestation is when, as happened with an email that I had received from Jim, is the fact that he was asking me to be part of a certain group where there is a 40-day type of prosperity plan that is offered based on the book of Abundance. And interestingly enough, I knew he was offering me this plan, but what was ironic was that I was already, or am already, following that particular book on a daily basis. So the synchronicity is the calling out to me to be part of a group. And the fact of the matter is, I'm already following that book unbeknownst to him. There's the synchronicity. And the manifestation of such is that we are both aware of this synchronicity. It's not just me following or being aware of an event that is happening, but it is two or more people being cognizant of this. And so that's why I've coined it as a synchronicity manifesting, because there's more than one bubble of operation. There are two bubbles that converge, and one is layering the other. And out of that, synchronicity is almost doubling. In other words, it's manifesting in more than one place.
So that is so interesting that, first off, we're starting to be able to share evidence for this world of synchronicity that in many respects all of us know is there, and it's fleeting, because often the mind will, just like when you have an insight or an intuition, the mind often second guesses it at some point. But for those starting to learn to rely on synchronicity, to rely on breadcrumbs to refined reality creating, and to start doing it in a shared manner inadvertently, not intentionally, not driven by the mind, but anyway. And that's what we're documenting here. Resonance matters. It does matter.
Yeah.
And so the fun part is when we're out of resistance, the world opens up. My email address, signature line: beyond resistance lies a world of synchronicity, harmony, and order. Said another way, resistance brings us everything we do not want.
Mm-hmm.
Out of resistance, and it opens up.
Yeah, and in terms of my particular focus, which is the area of happiness, all those things, peace, love, harmony, kindness, compassion, love, if you take any of those variables, they are all aspects of non-resistance. They are all values, if you like, of allowing. And that aspect of allowing is essentially a state of happiness or being content. It hasn't been identified as such, but it could be. So when you allow yourself to be calm and centered, so there is no resistance, you are in fact being content. And that is a state of happiness.
I experienced something 6 or 8 months ago. I possibly have mentioned this. I was in a networking group, and it was a group of about 12, let's say, and we got together every Wednesday. The theme was always quotes from somebody, and it kind of gave a commonality, because we would talk about the quotes, maybe we would read them and have comments, but the quotes were all from, now they were different authors to the quotes, but a common theme. And so we all were kind of tied together as a group, and each week it went on. Well, one Wednesday, one week, we were already into our mechanism of this connection we were all sharing around the quotations that we were using and talking about them. And a couple of guys came in late, and they were kind of boisterous, and they kind of stirred up some things in the people that are already here, because these two guys that came in late hadn't been in a while, and it kind of created a little bit, I say, turmoil. It kind of disturbed what was going on. It's not a real big deal, but you could see it. And then one of them even got even a little back and forth with somebody, and it just kind of got a little bit complex. And so eventually it faded down.
So you notice the phones are
Your phones are ringing and my phones are ringing at the same time?
and it's not you calling me.
No, it is not.
Now that would be something.
That's synchronicity manifested. I hope now this guy's trying to send me some money, and so anyway, so a little bit later, so I could see, when I say the tension, I could see the out of sorts a little bit that these two guys brought in, and they brought in some conversation with them and whatever. And later, the same group, everybody laughed together. And when you talk about happiness and you talk about allowing, what happiness is that natural state of no resistance. And I saw it happen in a small group of people where 40, 30 minutes earlier, there was a little bit of tension. And when they all let it go at the same time, everybody kind of tittered and kind of laughed. And there was a group laughter, and it was wonderful to see. And it was nothing but a letting go. It was interesting. It's like laughter. It's like kind of like energy bubbling up out of you that comes out when you're, I don't want to say empty, when you're not in resistance. And to start seeing it in a group mentality and learning how to harness that, or at least observe it, is a powerful idea. Even if your phones all ring at the same time.
I think that, again, the idea of taking on the cloaking of who you're with or the group you're with is huge. And as, again, we become more sensitive to our surroundings, we're aware, and we're very keen, I guess is the word too. There's an awareness and a keenness to be absolutely in the moment. That's another, I think, caveat of happiness. It's another caveat of allowing, that you are in the moment. But yeah, but what also happens in this case is if there is a disturbance, or if there is a heightened sense of contrariness or negativity, then that is probably far more felt or far more experienced than if you were not in a state of such openness and allowing. In my mind, it's a question even of let's take something very simple like noise or decibel level. I think when someone is becoming a little more aware and sensitive, then noise and the level of noise becomes because that becomes that much more intrusive. So that what you, for instance, listened to before, it could be a movie at a certain volume, or whatever, the radio, perhaps as time is going on. And this would be an interesting experiment, is to see, are you actually capable of hearing something at lower levels of decibel? So that if the TV, which was on at a level of 25 or whatever it may be, now you're fine with it being at a level of 20, Because I think there is an ability or a capability that begins to grow in yourself, that your senses are that much more attuned. And I think that's actually a very interesting, again, an interesting experiment that those listeners or we could do with ourselves. What you listened to or even watched, are the colors so vivid, or is the screen so filled with car chasing or whatever that before you found was fun, but now you find it's almost too jarring. It's a little too,
Comfortable.
yeah. What do you think, Jim?
Well, it's a really, really valid idea, and but I'm not convinced or sure that the subtleties of it mean that your hearing becomes better per se. I would more suggest that as we become more subtle inside, our sensing apparatus in general grows, and that more subtle nature becomes evident. It's like that intuitive nature becomes more available to you to walk around the mud puddle than through it. Like intuitively when you say something to somebody that you're going to get a reaction, so you know better than to say it. Where in the old days you would say it, get the reaction, then the thing spirals downhill from there. So it's really kind of what core resonance is about. As you quiet the nervous system, as you quiet the nervous system, the mind quiets down. But our connection with the cosmos requires a quieted nervous system to even identify. In other words, you're not going to notice your connection with the cosmos with a noisy brain and a noisy mind. And I think I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think it's actually the better analogy of what you're speaking about, I think. There is an efficiency factor that grows as you become more subtle and in your nature, and I would think it would take maybe less work to hear, but I would think also your ability to communicate would become more effective as you get more subtle, and of course you won't try to communicate with people that you have to friggin' yell to for them to hear you, or compete with for them to hear you because of their rigidity, and it takes more work to even listen to them. You go, I'm going to pass. Pass. I've got that coming up a little bit right now on something else. I think I'm going to give it one more shot. I think I'm going to pass.
Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is as we were talking about this, the experience of having it, in other words, listening to someone who's overly loud or whatever, the act of passing, as you say, the act of not engaging, I think there's a big difference here as well. In the past, that idea of not engaging was considered quite a dilemma, or could be quite a big sort of inner decision that you'd have to make, and you'd be wrestling with yourself. Well, maybe I'm going to lose an opportunity, or I really should speak to this person because so and so told me I should speak to this person, and isn't he the most important person in the room that I should come up to, etc. So there are all these logical arguments that in the past may have convinced you, even if your intuition, your inside was saying, is this really worth it? Perhaps there was a compulsion as dictated by the mind and logic, very, very rational reasons, in fact, to approach a person. And yet it's interesting, as time goes by and the subtlety emerges, then this idea of having to battle self to understand whether you're going to engage in a conversation or not, that dissipates, that dwindles to a point where once your inside talks to you, you're very ready to go, yeah, of course. And so that ensuing battle or indecision or uncertainty no longer exists. And so the energy that would have taken is no longer expelled. So your energetic self retains its base. You are stronger, or you retain the strength of whatever your inner self is, having passed or decided on that kind of a decision.
In other words, you don't dissipate yourself by going and making agreements with things that are not a match.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it takes a while, as I found, as perhaps you found, to move to that process where there is no longer if you want to say, there's no longer a battle between your mind and your soul, your mind and your heart, or your mind and your essence. And as many thought leaders, and when I say thought leaders, I speak of those spiritual thought leaders, say, there's, in one way, your essence, your soul, your heart is the boss. And once that claim is made, then the act of allowing and the act of just being is so restful. It's so comfortable.
And the people that you surround yourself with and the conversations you have become a match, and accordingly, they feed you. Did I lose you? I think I lost Keita. Well, I get it. So it's me and Bud here right this minute. Keita will be back. One of the concepts that's interesting is, to go back a little bit, the concept of visionaries thrive in all times comes from an Abraham expression. The Abraham expression is, observers thrive in good times and they suffer in bad. Visionaries thrive in all times. And kind of the point is that when you're observing, you're inadvertently taking in information always. As a massage therapist, you observe not through your eyes, but through your feelings when you work on people. And we have to learn how to observe. We have to only take in what we want, and we can be selective in our choices all the way around. We can be selective in how we, as a massage therapist, how we work on somebody, because early massage people, what they do is they work on people's pains, and they eventually learn to be a visionary. She tried to come back and didn't get in, so let's give her another shot here, give her another minute. And my point is that when you start out as a massage therapist and you work on people's pains, you're observing that. Well, 1 second. And as you observe people's pain, you take on their problem. And so as you become a visionary, you learn to hold on to the end result. And you stay separate from the problem. And of course, what we're talking about in this conversation is being even more subtle in making choices, because when you make a choice, you've kind of made that choice, you've married that choice, and now it's become part of you. And if it contains variations of rigidity or reactionary processing or this or that, and you're trying to go cleaner or go more conscious, they're not a very good match. And then the next remark, if I might, real quick, is that the 100-day prosperity plan is about the idea that there's so much abundance, and what we do is we grab what we get and we hold on to what we get, and we hold on to what we get whether it really serves us or not. And we're now learning that there are new choices, new availabilities constantly for us, and if we would let go of what we have that isn't a complete match, we would discover that there's a constant unfolding of new choices that are more refined. Let's what do you think, Keita?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. I think, but and as a corollary to that, what I'm discovering too about these choices is that every one of them are important. I think there's a much more careful and thoughtful approach to how you're living your life. That's a matter of course when you are in this form of process and evolution. But I would venture to say as well that decision making, even if it is as could be as small as saying, no, I'm going to pass up meeting that person at the party or whatever, but it could be as big as thinking and saying, I'm going to continue to date this person because I think they can give me the security I need. Let's say that's the premise. With evolution and the idea of being yourself and being in yourself totally as a human being, the needs for this kind of stability, security, all those kind of mind rational reasonings, mind-driven stuff are examined, and you realize that they don't need to be the drivers for your decisions. Because if they are, then what can happen is the decisions, especially if they're big ones like committing to a relationship or changing jobs or moving cities. They may, in the long run, have consequences that are not the consequences that you wanted initially. And so I think as we become more thoughtful and involved and allowing, the decisions we make have hopefully, and I think they are, they're better informed, they're more thoughtful. And so the long-term consequences of every single decision we make are perhaps more beneficial, are for the better. They're not only for the better for ourselves, because this is what an allowing state is capable of, they're also better for everyone around us. And you'll notice that in allowing, yes, you are making decisions for yourself, but those decisions, for the most part, have ripple effects on everybody else. And they become good, or they become beneficial for all those who might be involved. Don't you find?
Well, and so this is how synchronicity works. It doesn't work when we get in a fight with somebody. Well, I mean, it might. You get in a fight with somebody and you go to the next event, you get in a fight with somebody again. Maybe that is synchronicity, but the mechanics of the world is as we allow, the order grows and it becomes more evident to us. I like to think that, well, the more we move out of resistance, the more we move into allowing, simply the better things get. And now we're finding shared camaraderie, like what? The phone's ringing together. Working on a variation on the 100-day prosperity plan at the same time. And
the fact of the matter is, you can extrapolate, or you can expand upon that and say, if this is happening in our circle, it's probably happening elsewhere. And eventually, these smaller clusters of communication and of sharing and of thoughtfulness and of allowing are simply going to grow and eventually overlap. I fully expect that either whoever is listening or might be listening, that may be a case in point, will join us. And so that becomes another case of a growing, of allowing. But there might be something bigger here that will eventually be of benefit to us immediately, and then over long term, with groups that converge. And that convergence will be synchronicity, and it will be a manifestation of an initial thought process or initial thought processes that are occurring within small groups like ourselves.
you mean like synchronicity manifested?
Yeah.
Well, so that begs the question, how much, first off, I believe that consciousness is coming onto this planet anyway, and it would be more evident if the headlines weren't so noisy with junk. Like, I know that in the U.S. that crime and murders have dropped. Murder is such a terrible word in the first place, but it's been dropping for like 20 years. I don't know what the actual numbers are anymore, but dropping for 20 years. But nobody knows that because they keep highlighting, the news and the media keeps highlighting the latest carnage, the latest dumb thing. And my point is under the cover of all the headlines, consciousness keeps, I started to say inching forward, it keeps moving forward. And the question becomes, how much of it comes from outside of us? In other words, is consciousness just coming anyway? And as we release and relax and let go, we get caught up in the unfolding of it. Or how much of it is actually coming from us wanting it and calling it in? And I suppose, is there really a difference? But the point is the kind of synchronicities we're talking about in the groups. It's such a nice idea to bring to the forefront for conversation, is the kind of things we're experiencing, lots and lots and lots and lots of other people are. And I suppose the only thing left is for them to become increasingly conscious and increasingly aware of it. And as they move out of resistance and reaction, the subtleties begin to become evident.
Yeah.
And enjoy and make better choices.
Yeah. It's obviously a process. It's not an instant kind of thing.
You don't just pull a lid open or pull an envelope open and all of a sudden we got consciousness just like that.
Just like that, yeah. But I see, and that in and of itself is a bit in opposition to the speed of, let's say, gratification needs and instant results and speedy outcomes, because speed in and of itself is not necessarily good, but it's been perceived to be good or perceived to be professional or perceived to be, pardon?
I thought you said speed. I didn't know what you.
Speed, yeah, speed, as in the speed of life, things happening and wanting instant gratification or speedy results. And sometimes our society, in its speed, in its saying, if you get this faster, it's obviously got to be better because it's faster. Again, there's a misperception there, as is a lot of aspects to the world in just what you said. Media pitching the latest crime or what incident, when in fact, yes, in the same case as here in Canada, crime rate is down. There's no question about it. The only reason we're having difficulties, it could be the same in the States, is 60 to 70% of the inmates or those who are waiting on trials are those who are having challenges. They're either mentally handicapped, they suffer from disorders or other sicknesses, and there is no other place for them to go. And so, and unfortunately, they are the ones who are perhaps acting out in society what is deemed to be normal and not normal. And for that reasons, they're incarcerated. Because as is indicated here, the institutions of old are no longer operating. They were closed down in the 70s and 80s. But who and what is answering the call for the needs of those who are marginalized? That is a big question for Western society.
You know, I think we've mentioned it before, but Michael Moore's latest movie, did you get around to seeing it by chance?
No, I haven't seen it yet, no.
Oh, what is it? What country should we invade next or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
It so capably identifies, when I say socialism, everybody's got a bad idea about that, but what a government should be is a mediator among the people in its country. It's not supposed to be the guys that start wars with other countries and collect tax and have things for themselves. The government's function is to be a mediator for the people, and with the authority that it has and the money that it has, is enhance humanity's being. That's what government was created for in the first place. And Michael Moore's movie so capably displays the first example is, I forget what the company is. It's a good sized company, one we know. And the employees get 5 weeks of vacation every year. Now, I don't know how long it takes. It's not a 20-year thing. It only takes a couple of years. But as soon as you're a full-time employee, you get paid vacation. When you get married, you get, I think it's 3 weeks for honeymoon paid. And the idea is the employers want the employees to be happy. They want them to take time off. They want them to go have a life. They want them to come to work and be happy to be at work. And we haven't found that yet over here. Now, I don't know about Canada so much, but we're trying to control our employees. We're trying to pay them as little as possible. And what the Michael Moore movie displays so very well, there's another example where these guys that are in prison for whatever, and I think even one guy they were talking about, somebody had killed quite a few people, and they put him in the same prison, and it's a country club. There are no bars on the windows, to say the very least. It's a respite from the world to take a break. It's not about punishing them. It's like a variation on time out.
Mm-hmm.
No looking down your nose at them. And I suppose in that they find people that don't have the ability to be in the public, if you will. And so in this caring about people instead of controlling people, then the people that can't help themselves, taking care of them becomes a whole new level of the importance of government in the first place. And I think that's where what I perceive as the idea of socialism is, see, because what's happened is capitalism has made a Republican form of government, or how we do things, democracy, whatever, very uneven, because the next thing you know, only a few people that are wired for it have all the money, and a whole bunch of people don't have any money. And they get taken advantage of. And the government should be coming in my opinion, and creating a level playing field for everybody. Not about giving everybody anything, but keeping some people from abusing others, and making sure everybody eats every day, making sure everybody has medicine in hospitals and all that, and just the fundamentals. And until we have that, we have this big disparity. And so I think the idea of what socialism was and it is becoming different, because I think the government should be a servant of the people and should cater to people and make sure, again, that people don't go hungry, and people that can't help themselves have access to treatment, and we treat everybody like humans first and foremost. Did I get off track on that?
A little bit, but that was all right. It's in Canada, we have a social democracy, so already this challenge of the, it's not so much, I don't think it's a willful mistreatment, but simply infrastructure is not made amends or taken the time to realize that at some point there are people who truly need our help. They need the community's help. They need the government's help. The idea of survival of the fittest is a very it's a very severe statement.
It's ancient. It is ancient. It's ancient.
Yeah, it's severe, and it basically, if we go to Hawking's state of levels of consciousness, we could come back to that and talk about and realize that to be kind to someone else and to share and to contribute, one is at a greater or a higher level than one is when one is simply existing.
Well, look at it this way. Survival of the fittest is changing. Survival of the fittest now includes a consciousness component. It's not just the beating your fists on your chest and saying, okay, all the money is mine, or all the women are mine, or whatever. What we're discovering is that survival of the fittest is the ones that use consciousness for going forward, because I've discovered that the more conscious you become, the more efficient you become. Now, it's true, we have to move away from the gross way of doing things and move into the subtleties, but in the subtleties where the synchronicities show up on their own, that's efficient.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's where society will eventually discover its direction, because as we go to smaller batteries in our flashlights and our cameras and our whatever, and computers are more efficient. Eventually, the humans will discover that our spiritual component is our most efficient component, and survival of the fittest will continue, but it won't be armor and seeing how much you can amass. It'll be more about our connection with the cosmos, and I think it will morph like everything else does.
Yeah, it might be worthwhile writing about that, in the sense that survival of the fittest for me is a phrase that unfortunately has negative connotations.
Of course.
And it would be interesting to set that idea of the phrase survival of the fittest in a context that is spiritual, and examine that phrase in that context. Then it takes on a whole new, literally a whole new meaning.
And I think we're going that way because, there was a time when there wasn't such a thing as a democracy. The king ruled, and that's all there was. And there were some good kings, but there was a lot of despots. Is that how you pronounce them? A despot?
A despot.
People that kind of manipulated the masses, and that's all that they did. And eventually, we went through the Star Chamber and the Magna Carta and establishing that people had basic rights. That's 1,000 years old. I don't know how far it goes back. Magna Carta was 1215. But this evolution does continue, and we refine at the rate and speed we do. And right this minute, I think this capitalism thing has become abusive. It's actually a good system, but it's become abusive, and so many don't have basics. I don't think it's through so much their own fault, and there's a component of that. But once people lose out enough, they kind of lose interest. But our school system doesn't teach basics about harnessing the subconscious mind, or that inward component that we all have to learn about. The society doesn't really, in other words, society doesn't really teach empowerment. And so for some, empowerment is to be the biggest guy on top of the hill. That's the first phase. But the spiritual component's coming along, and more of us are going for that inner nature and deciding that meditation gives us the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I started meditating however long it was ago. I discovered that meditation glued my day together differently, and that became valuable, especially being strictly commissioned sales as a yacht broker and all the different things I've done. And how I came into my day was a huge influence on how I got paid. And so refining my inner nature was the secret.
Mm-hmm. I fully appreciate that. Maybe that's something, or you can continue the conversation, because I will have to get offline to attend to another call. But maybe we could pursue this even next week, or you could close off by however you will, and then we can pick up on it next week.
Well, so let's take the idea maybe that survival of the fittest is something to look at. Let's look at the idea of what does fittest mean. In the old days, it meant the more resistance, the more power you had.
Mm-hmm.
And I think let's explore what fittest means.
It's moving on a spectrum from outright the physical, who's the strongest, has the biggest spear, which is downright physical, to the spiritual. So the idea of using the word fittest isn't in itself evolving. So we can explore that. Be good. I've got to run, but it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Keita Sprach.
That's it. You get a gold star.
All right. Very good.
Okay. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.